What's up, everyone? Sorry, that was my bad. I didn't give her the technical details, so hopefully Margie will join us pretty soon. Yeah, she's been awesome. She's been supportive from the beginning, and has been super, just a good friend. And honestly, I don't even remember how. Um, if I recall, I might have. I don't know if I called her or she called me first, or if I stole her as a client. If I did, I'm sorry, but it just kind of worked out that way. And Margie has
Good, just leave
been
it.
super,
You can't be
super
there because it's going to
supportive.
be
What's
background
up,
noise.
Margie?
Hi.
So, yeah, it's been awesome to have. I was just saying how I don't even know or remember how we met or how you even came to follow me or whatever. I don't know if I stole you
Well,
or as a client.
well, I think we met when I was getting PT over in Reston,
Yeah, my old
and
office. Yep.
yeah, but then I don't I don't think I came to you for PT
Yeah.
for a little bit yet from
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
Like maybe a year or two later, I
Yeah.
came to you for PT. So
Yeah.
you didn't really steal me.
I
It
don't
was
know. Yeah, I don't even know how I got your number or we got each other's numbers, but anyways, it all worked out, so
yeah, yeah,
whatever. So anyways, yeah, it's thanks for obviously getting on, but um
my pleasure.
what's been kind of your story as far as uh your journey through triathlon and how you came about and kind of jumped onto the pro level and all that good stuff.
I can go backwards or forwards.
It
Do you
doesn't
want me to
matter.
start in the
Start
now?
from wherever you want. Yeah.
Maybe I'll start at the beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it really started truly, if we want to be literal.
Uh-huh.
I My roots of triathlon started when I started swimming, which is
Uh-huh.
when I was about 4 years old.
Uh-huh.
But I was a swimmer for much of my life, and then in high school I switched to running, which
Hmm.
I did through high school and college. And then when I finished college, I was just used to being really active.
Sure.
I had been injured quite a bit in college, and I had a bit of a bad taste in my mouth about running, and I had no interest in being a runner,
Hmm.
competing as a runner. But
Hmm.
I wanted to stay active, and I was coaching high school runners.
Hmm.
So for a while, I was just doing workouts with the high school kids and kind of staying fit without trying to.
Hmm.
And my friend John Farrell, who I was coaching with at the time, convinced me to try a triathlon. But what we were doing was we were doing duathlon first. And it was mountain bike
Uh-huh.
duathlon,
Oh,
which
nice.
which was a
I didn't know you
disaster.
did. I didn't know you started with mountain bike.
Yeah, well, I had a mountain bike that was maybe $300 that I used to ride to work,
Nice.
and we went out and did a couple of they called them biathlons
Uh-huh.
actually
Uh-huh.
at the time, and it was mountain biking and running,
Uh-huh.
and nobody was doing these things. I mean, they were it was it was very new, and so I won a couple of those, and then we just decided we would do a triathlon, which
Uh-huh.
happened to be Columbia Triathlon, the first one that I coached you to do.
Nice. Yes,
Um,
yes.
so that was my first triathlon also,
And you won that.
and I won it. Actually, that year I don't think I won it. I
Okay.
think that year I was second, if I
Uh-huh.
remember correctly.
Uh-huh.
But that was actually, um, I think that was the year I was getting married, which
Hmm.
was 1999, believe it or not.
Hmm.
And and then I did a couple other triathlons, and then I was injured. Like
Hmm.
that's a normal pattern.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I got away from it. I had my son, and then
Uh-huh.
when I came back after having my son is when I really started getting into it more.
Okay.
And then I ended up race. I think the last 2 years I raced as an amateur. I was kind of winning everything, and I didn't
Uh-huh.
have much competition.
Uh-huh.
So when I turned pro, it was after I had no intention of being a pro triathlete. It was more like the logical next step because I
Sure.
wanted to have competition.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
How was it jumping to the next level? I think I've had several people on with this Instagram live stuff, and they've all had a common thread about like once they got to that pro level, it was like another whole new world of like, oh my gosh, there's people that are at my level, and
yeah,
it was a wake up call. Was that the same thing for you?
yeah. It was. I didn't think
Uh-huh.
of it like that at the time because it was also a really steep learning curve because I was going from amateur non-draft legal racing
Mm-hmm.
to draft legal racing.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, I was racing on the ITU circuit because my dream was like Olympic qualification,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was draft legal, which it still is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I needed to learn. It took me quite a long time to not really learn how to do it right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So because obviously draft legal cycling is very different from non-drafting, and the
Yeah.
way that the triathlon race plays out is completely different. So it was definitely a huge learning curve, and it was a lot. I, I I had a coach at the time who was a physiologist and
Mm-hmm.
and an expert at what he did, very sharp on the training piece, and
Mm-hmm.
he really helped me to develop fitness.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't have experience with ITU.
Mm-hmm.
So I really didn't have any guidance as to how to do this. And I was
That's,
traveling internationally by myself.
mm-hmm.
So it was kind of a comedy of errors throughout the whole time.
But
And it was a lot of
yeah,
fun too.
it was more like the tactical stuff and things like that, right?
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
pretty much did everything the way you're not supposed to do it.
That's the way to learn, though.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so I didn't really learn well. I mean, I didn't have the right tools for that kind of racing either,
Uh-huh.
but
Uh-huh.
it took me some time to learn that. And when I finally switched over to long course racing, back to non-drafting, I
Yeah.
had more success. So
How was it trying to juggle family? That's I can't. Most professional triathletes, they don't have children and all the other stuff. You have a unique kind of story, I guess. Trying to
yeah,
balance that. Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot more common now
Yeah.
too.
Uh-huh.
When I was racing ITU, this was in, I started racing ITU in 2006 and did
Mm-hmm.
so until about 2011.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I might have met or might have competed against two other women in the world
Mm-hmm.
who had kids at that time racing
Yeah.
ITU. And the reason for the ITU stuff being less common even then
Mm-hmm.
is that there's so much travel involved, and most
Sure.
people set up camps. So they'll do a block in Europe and they'll stay in Europe for 6 weeks, and then they'll do a block in Asia and they'll stay over there.
Yeah.
Whereas I was leaving on a Thursday and coming back on a Sunday
Crazy.
for long. I'd leave on a Thursday for Japan and come back on Monday.
Wow.
So that part I think really wore me down quite a bit, and I
Yeah.
didn't realize it at the time. The toll the travel took and the disruption to training
Yeah.
that you have to face when you're not setting up a camp.
Yeah.
But I wasn't going to set up any camps to be away from my family for
Sure.
6 weeks at a time. So that
Huh.
part, it was at the time I wasn't thinking about it.
Yeah.
Everything
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
happening. You're in a snowball and you don't
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
think about it. But when I look back on it now, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
It
Yeah. Yeah.
was. But on the flip side, it made. I think it gave me an appreciation for the opportunities that made it easier
Mm-hmm.
to handle some of the lack of success that
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
would, when you're at that kind of a level and you're so driven to achieve certain things and that's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
If it's all you're focused on,
Mm-hmm.
it can be devastating. And it wasn't
Sure.
all I was focused on. So I think in a way it was kind of like a sort of an advantage
It's
too.
almost like having your family there to support you was a big plus, even
Yeah.
during defeat and frustration and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
And
how old was Will during that time?
well, Will was born in 2000, the end of 2000, and Molly was born in 2003. So
Wow.
can you hear okay? There's
Yeah,
some,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I turned pro at the very end of 2005.
Okay.
I won the world championship as an amateur in 2005.
Uh-huh.
And I remember we went to Hawaii for that one, and Molly was a 2-year-old at the time.
Wow.
So they were 3 and 6 when I
Yeah,
started racing as a pro.
yeah,
And that was basically, I guess, that was about a 6 or 7 year, no, it was
yeah,
more than that. It was like a 10-year block.
yeah.
So,
Don't you ever, I know probably there weren't a lot of fellow athletes that were in the same boat as you. Like, how do you not get into that hole of almost feeling sorry for yourself, like you're at a disadvantage? Because you're like no one can understand exactly what you're going through, especially for you when you have
yeah.
kids. Like that's the unique situation. So how did you handle that without burying yourself into that deep hole, I guess?
Well, I had a role model
Uh-huh.
who don't think knew she was a role model to me at the time, named
Mm-hmm.
Susan Williams, and
Mm-hmm.
she had been an Olympian in Athens, and had
Mm-hmm.
she raced in Athens as a new mom. She had
Mm-hmm.
like I think maybe her baby was like close to 2 at that time.
Wow.
So she was one of the 2 women in the world I knew at
Uh-huh.
that time, and she was older than I was, and had basically retired out of the sport once I was into it
Uh-huh.
for the most part. And I think knowing that she had done it, you can feel sorry for yourself, and I did. There
Yeah,
are
yeah,
plenty of
yeah.
times
Of
I did,
course. Yeah.
but you can't feel that sorry for yourself when you see other people are capable of doing something that you are feeling sorry for yourself for not being able to do, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So knowing she had been successful at it was probably more inspiring to me at the time than I realized.
Yeah.
And it's a little humility check to
Sure.
know people can do this.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then as the years went on, there were, people started to try it too, to
Mm-hmm.
try to come back after pregnancy,
Yeah.
and now there's plenty, now it's really much less uncommon than it
Yeah.
was.
You started
But
a trend.
I I think maybe a trend that nobody knew they were following from me, but
Yes, yeah, that's crazy. I mean, so for you, I think I've been asking this question to a lot of the athletes, like how is most of you getting to that next level a talent thing or effort, discipline? Like how much of that is, between the two? Is there a percentage that you would say, or like
um,
how would you describe that?
I'd like to define and I'd like to put it in numbers.
Yeah, give me numbers.
Except it's hard to. So I was just talking about this with Brendan, not just a few minutes ago, and I would say that um, anyone who's at that level
Hmm.
has a lot of talent.
Sure.
Probably,
You have to
you
get
know,
to
you
be at
have
that
to be
level. Yeah,
talented to,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And what separates the very best from like the second tier
Hmm.
is is a combination of maybe a little more talent,
Uh-huh.
and we can define talent in a minute because there's a caveat to it.
Uh-huh.
Good circumstances,
Hmm.
which help with recovery and with making the training work,
Yeah,
and support, the right
sure,
support.
sure.
So I have I would say where my talent is aerobic talent. I have a
Hmm.
huge heart and lungs cardiovascular
Yeah,
system.
yeah.
Where I'm really lacking is the musculoskeletal system to support that.
Uh-huh.
So my body has always been able to, my heart and lungs have been able to do more than what my legs especially could support.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that the people, we were just talking about this, Brendan and I, the people who really succeed in endurance sports,
Uh-huh.
they can sustain the repetitive workload for years at a
Yeah.
time without
It,
disruption.
interesting.
Those are the ones who get the furthest.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so that's a talent. I think
yeah,
that physical durability is a talent.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then when you add to it the support,
Hmm.
if you're doing all the right things to recover, if you're getting enough sleep, if you're eating right, if you're getting treatment, if your life stress is in balance,
Yep.
and I had that support,
Uh-huh.
it certainly helps, and that can take you past the point of where everyone is on an equal level of talent playing field.
Yeah.
And then the final piece is, do you have all the logistics down?
Hmm.
Are you and your coach dialed in? Are you getting the training just right? Are you setting up your races with the
Hmm.
proper sleep because you're setting up a camp in Europe
Yeah,
for six
yeah,
weeks?
yeah, yeah.
And some of that comes from on the national level. When you're on the national team, you can get some financial support that way.
Uh-huh.
But my lifestyle didn't jive with that.
Uh-huh.
So even if I was getting the support, I couldn't really use it all the time.
Yeah,
So I think those are all kind of pieces that work together.
yeah,
But the talent piece, I would say, is probably 50% of it. And
for
then the
sure.
other 50% is the rest.
Yeah, yeah. And actually that's a unique or that's an interesting thing that you bring up because, when I first trained with you as a coach, and you're my first coach that ever had, and I remember doing the Columbia Triathlon, duathlon, and I remember distinctly how you had literally every little detail of every little hill, every little incline in your head, and that is a skill, and I didn't appreciate it as much as I should have back then because I didn't understand why I needed to know all these little things, and that is something that is very underestimated or like kind of swept under the rug, but that is huge. If you know the
Yeah.
logistical parts, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and a little disclaimer.
uh-huh,
I mean, I think coaches do as much scouting as they can do,
uh-huh.
but we had a unique advantage there because that was like my favorite
Yeah,
race,
that's
and
your
so
race. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
trained on that course. I had raced on it 5 times probably by
Yeah,
the
yeah,
time we brought you to that course. So
yeah.
definitely I had a unique level of understanding
Sure.
of that particular course.
But I mean, I
So
think that just goes to show how detail oriented you are as an athlete. Because I know that
yeah.
you are super, super like I could you focus on every little thing, and there's nothing that's ever skipped over. Um, and what do you attribute that to? Is that just part of your nature, or is it kind of like learned as you have become a mom, athlete, teacher, all that stuff?
Interesting question. I do think it's part of my nature to
Uh-huh.
have the capacity.
Uh-huh.
Um, I don't have issues paying attention. I don't have issues like honing in on something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, I will give credit to my first coach, Ken Murky, who he he actually always used to say, "Leave no stone unturned,"
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and he was big into details.
Yep.
And I think he taught me, you know, not even always overtly, but to make sure you take care of those things.
Yeah, yeah.
Just because, especially when you're racing at that level, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everyone is in the 99th percentile. So
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about like 0.2% that could make the difference between winning $15,000 and coming in 10th place and getting like
Sure.
a $2,000 check.
Wow.
So it definitely you have to look at those details. You're
Uh-huh.
required to
Uh-huh.
if you want to be successful. And so part of it was like a learning process of figuring
Uh-huh.
out, okay, this is what I have to look at. And then part of it was being told to me by my very first coach, and then some of it is my personality too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's good. That's a it's kudos to your insane focus and like, ability to process all that. Um, so as far as injury, you kind of touched on it, but how have, you've been injured a lot. I know you've been injured a lot, but how have you been able to overcome all the setbacks and continue to move forward as an athlete?
Insanity.
I know
um,
that part.
I think anyone who,
Yeah,
probably most people who race triathlon and other endurance sports would agree that
yeah,
there's at least some insanity in there that, you try to do the same thing over and over and get a different result, and you don't get the different result. That's because you can't do the same
yeah.
thing. Um, I think also it's just, I think to a fault,
Hmm.
being driven, setting goals so high and being unwilling to let go of them.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, there's probably been, I probably can't count on two hands the number of times that I should have backed off.
Hmm.
And I said, I just need to get to this next thing. I just need to get to this
Yeah,
next race. I'll just get through this next whatever.
yep,
And that's not necessarily a good thing all the time.
yeah, yeah,
Um, it's kind of like you need that to get where
yeah.
you're trying to go, but it can be self-sabotaging. So
There's a fine line there. Like
yeah.
there's a small line where like you cross that margin, you hit that
Hmm.
threshold, and you know that your tissues are like pissed off.
Yeah.
And but then if you don't hit that, then you're not gonna gain that performance.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
a lot of it is learning your body. And
Uh-huh.
I do feel like a lot of the time I kind of knew what my body was telling me, but I was trying to deny it.
Yeah.
And then some of it is having the right communication with your coach.
Hmm.
I probably did not a lot of times when there was a big block of time when I was self-coaching.
Uh-huh.
And probably some of my worst injuries happened during that time period
Uh-oh.
because I didn't have someone to hold me back,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so having open communication with your coach and them being able to read the situation outside of you without the
Hmm.
same level of obsessive focus, they can say, okay, we need to back off now.
Sure. Yeah.
And so if you have a coach, but you're not giving the full picture, then they might not know to pull you back.
Yeah.
Or if you're coaching yourself and you're just not listening to your body, which is a lot of times what was happening with me, then I wouldn't pull myself back in time. Where if you pulled yourself back 2 days prior, maybe the next 6 weeks would be entirely different.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think
that part, that's tricky.
yeah, that is tricky, and I think that's what all the other athletes that I've had so far has said, especially in endurance sports. Like
Hmm.
you need to have that coach. You need to have a I guess big eye in the sky kind of thing, and see the overall picture and have more of an objective view, because we can get lost in our training and just burn ourselves to the ground, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. What's what was the hardest rehab that you had to get through? What injury was the worst?
Well, that's a so I was plagued by plantar fasciitis for probably 4 years,
Hmm.
and including some of college, and that one was really tough. And I actually, the way I got through it was by getting pregnant. So,
So you got to
but
get pregnant to get rid of it.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and that one doesn't. So we're going to discount that one because that's not at the disposal of most people. So, I would say the knee injury and the resulting surgery and the resulting rehab. Well, that took me out of the sport.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that I would say was the worst, and I would say the shoulder was probably the most painful.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so the shoulder was really really painful during the time that I was injured before I ended up fixing it.
Hmm.
Um, and I did a whole bunch of things to try to avoid surgery that didn't get me where I needed to be. But the
Hmm.
surgery itself, coming out of that, was really really painful. And I remember
Yeah.
the rehab was very painful. But I have not had, knock on wood, I've not had issues with that shoulder since then. So
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people shoulder surgeries are probably the worst surgeries to get it through. I mean, as
yeah.
a PT, like I tell people that is by far the hardest, because you're using that extremity all the time and you don't know how much you use it. And
Yeah, you don't realize you need it for brushing your teeth. It
oh,
was my
everything.
right shoulder, which is I'm
Yeah.
right-handed, so like
Yeah,
brushing
yeah,
my
yeah.
teeth was weird. Even putting on,
Yep.
you can't put on a shirt.
Yep. It's the
So
worst. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Terrible. Um, After you had kind of like that career ending, I guess, injury, was it hard to kind of go through that process? It's almost like a grieving process, right? Was
yeah,
it hard to get through that?
yeah. It was, the life circumstances were such that so many new things were happening at once,
Hmm.
um, that it made it easier. And I
Yeah.
also kind of knew in the 2 to 3 years prior,
Hmm.
that the end was near, because
Yeah.
I think I had that. I was 38 when I had that surgery, or
Hmm.
yeah, I think it was 38. So I wasn't really intending to go. I mean, most female athletes start declining about 35, and I kind of
Hmm.
knew I was in that downward. I was going to be in that downward spiral without being injured pretty soon
Hmm.
anyway.
Hmm.
So I may have started letting go before I even really
Sure.
had to let go.
Yeah.
Um, but I also, we sold our half of the business at that time. I started
Hmm.
teaching again at the time.
Hmm.
So there was so much change in my
Yeah.
life that it was
Yeah.
very distracting in a way that I think helped me to move past it more
Yeah.
easily.
Yeah. I mean, that's good that you had. I mean, obviously you're a woman of many talents, so you probably had things
Thank
that
you.
were you already had things that were lined up for you. How is teaching now? How is it? How's the whole change in career? You've had a couple years under your belt. Do you love it?
I do. I'm
Yeah.
glad to be back. I started off as a teacher way back
Hmm.
when I graduated college, so it almost felt like I hadn't really left in certain ways. When I
Hmm.
got back to it, it was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. It was a
Hmm.
lot different.
Hmm.
16 years later, there
Hmm.
was a lot of new stuff to learn, but yeah, I do. I get, I miss racing. I miss
Hmm.
the lifestyle, and I go through periods where I really miss it.
Uh-huh.
Um, and that, so I'm really glad to have had that period in my life,
Sure.
and the memories and thinking back on it, there's always regrets and things I wish I'd done differently, but definitely, I'm so glad that I took the time away from teaching to become a mom, and then
Yeah.
things went the way they went to kind of lead me down that path that was never planned or expected.
Uh-huh.
So now that I'm back to teaching, it's almost like things have come full circle.
Uh-huh.
And the only part that's missing right now is that when I first started teaching, I was coaching high school runners.
Hmm.
And I do miss that part also.
Hmm.
I coach adults now, but it's very different than coaching
Yeah.
high school.
Yeah.
But I don't miss it enough to go back to
Yeah.
it because it's so much work. It's such a
Yeah.
time commitment.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to lay any hints that I'm going back to that because I'm not. So
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of teenagers that would love to have you coach them running. So
it would be fun. It would
yeah.
be fun. I can't, so now I would run with them all the time when I was
Yeah.
coaching before. And
Yeah.
now I wouldn't be able to do that. And I think it would be really hard to just stand there the whole
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the timing was perfect when I did it before, and now it's not. So it's an easy excuse not to do it.
Yes, true. How is the coaching? How is um I know that obviously you coach me, but like how is that the unique aspect of coaching people and them knowing that you're at the pro level, and do they get intimidated by it? What's kind of like I guess the whole environment there?
There's actually, I would say that I have maybe one or two coaching clients who don't know.
They don't know at
Um,
all?
yeah, I don't publicize that.
My
Um,
mission is to tell them. I'm gonna tell them. I'm gonna email them.
Usually, I mean, I've had a couple actually recent people. One you referred to me
Uh-huh.
who Googled me, and they were
They are intimidated.
intimidated
Yeah, yeah,
once
yeah.
they and so I don't think I'm a very intimidating person. So it's kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
funny
yeah.
when they say that,
Yeah.
but there's a few who don't know, and then I have a few who I've been coaching for maybe 8 or 10 years. So
Uh-huh.
they were kind of with me through the process of all of it, and
Yeah.
so it varies based on the person, but
Yeah.
they know the ones who know about my background. I mean, everybody knows I've been coaching for a long time, but
Uh-huh.
not everybody knows my own racing history, but
Uh-huh.
they do know that they know the level of detail that I'm putting in
Yeah.
um, comes from a certain level of experience.
Of
So
course. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, so I think that's helpful.
That is helpful. I have some questions for you. What these are random questions.
Okay.
Best race you ever had and why? I think I already know this, but
So do you mean like where I was happiest about my performance?
yeah, anything. Like experience, the course, your result. What would you say? What was your
Okay.
best race?
So I think my favorite course. So I have my favorites for all three parts.
Okay.
Um, I
Give me
think
all
maybe
the
what some of the races that I had the best results, like
uh-huh.
objectively, were not they weren't impressive in terms of what I had to do to get that result. So
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes what I would call it one of my best races, the result doesn't necessarily reflect that.
Yeah.
Um, so there, gosh, it's hard because there's so many different races. My favorite bike course is the one in Henderson, Nevada, which is
Uh-huh.
had been the world championship course for the 70.3 world championships I think maybe I did that course 3 times for the world championship. Um,
Wow.
and never was I super pleased with my end result in the
Hmm.
race. Um,
Hmm.
but I think it might have been the first year that I did that course.
Hmm.
I had a really strong ride, really,
Nice.
really strong. Probably too strong because I didn't run that well off of it. Um, but the swim and the ride were good. And I
Uh-huh.
think I came off the bike in third place.
Nice.
And that was maybe my best ride,
Uh-huh.
objectively. And
Uh-huh.
then there's some races where I just kind of overcame some things that I feel
Sure.
proud about.
Sure.
And some races where I had a plan and I executed it. Like
Yeah.
the last race I finished, I had my knee injury at the time.
Uh-huh.
The last race I did was a world championship in 2014 in Canada,
Uh-huh.
Mont Tremblant, and I
Uh-huh.
didn't finish.
Oh.
The race before that was in Buffalo Springs, Texas.
Hmm.
And my coach and I was injured at the time. I had the knee injury that that was the reason I didn't finish the following race, and the reason I'm no longer racing. But we were just trying to manage it at that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in Buffalo Springs, I had a really good swim, one of my best. And then we had a plan on the bike that my coach was very analytical about wattage and how, he knew where my strengths were and how to. So we had this plan of how I was going to attack certain parts of the course and what I was going to do. It's harder to be tactical in a non-drafting race because obviously you're not sitting in a pack, but we knew my competitors and we knew how they were going to ride the ride. And so he had kind of told me what to do at certain points in the race, to places where I could just like throw down the hammer for 5 minutes straight and create a gap to break people mentally.
Super tactical, very tactical.
And I did what he said, and I at the time I remember thinking like, I'm not sure I should do this. This is really hard, but it worked. So that was a really satisfying race because I didn't end up winning because I didn't run well off the bike, but I ran well for a little bit of it. Then I fell apart at the end and ended up getting second. But it was very rewarding to have a plan that I didn't come up with. To trust in it, to do it, to have it work. And so that was a really fun one. And I also just really loved that race. It was really just a fun race to do. So
that's cool.
There were other ones I had. No, go ahead.
No, I think it's what you just said reminded me of what you told me on my Columbia duathlon. And I think I remember specifically you told me certain parts of the terrain to go just hammer hard. And I remember getting off of the run to the bike and my power meter wasn't working. I was like super flustered and I just went by feel because you tell me to listen to my body. And I did exactly what you said. And I had a really good bike and I was like, wow. Okay, I understand. Margie knows what she's talking about. I was like, no, it's super satisfying though when things happen that way. When you just trust the process.
It really is.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, even when you don't end up with the exact result you want, it's really satisfying to carry it out the best you can. So
because you spend all that time with the coach telling you what to do, you follow the plan to the T, and when you go race day and things happen, and it's cool. And I'm sure that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen a lot. I don't have enough data or races to say that, but it is, I'm sure, very rare for all that to really fall into place at the right time. So,
so it's fun when it does.
It is. So you, as a business owner, how was that? Obviously, there's business owning is not for the faint of heart, but like, how was your experience as an athlete? But also, I think you were probably racing pro, right, at that time, and a business owner.
Yeah. Well, when we first started, I was pregnant actually.
Okay.
So I wasn't racing at all. But when we first started, it was Brendan and Kathy, and it was their thing. And so it took a little time for me to have a role at all. And it was always more, I was more peripheral because my role was really more on the coaching side and on the kind of developing training program side. My role was indirectly on the marketing side by racing. So the other three, my husband and my sister and her husband, really afforded me a very special opportunity to be able to do that, to go and race. I was traveling a ton. I mean, I think there was one year where I was in 14 different countries over the span of 18 weeks or something like that.
Oh my gosh, crazy.
And so in a business ownership situation, obviously there's all sorts of stressors, but it does give you a level of flexibility that you wouldn't have if you're working for someone else. So that part was really a huge benefit. And then because this partners were my sister, her husband, and my husband, who also were like my three biggest cheerleaders other than my mom. It was definitely that made things easier. There was a lot of guilt. I'd say I felt a lot of guilt
Mm-hmm.
maybe throughout the whole time that I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't doing enough. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
feel like I was contributing my fair share a lot of the time. That um, anyone who's lots of things probably feels that in some part of their life. Like, I'm not doing
Of
enough
course.
here because I'm
Yes.
spending it there. And it's not
Yep.
reasonable to think that way,
Yep.
um,
Yep.
but I think it's pretty
Yeah,
natural.
I
So,
think people always try to say you got to have
yeah. So,
balance in your life, but
I mean, it was
yeah,
challenging for sure. I felt jealous of
lost you for a second.
her cutting out, I think.
Sorry. You got me?
I'm losing.
You hear me? You got me?
I hear your voice, but your face
Okay,
is
sorry.
frozen. Now,
It's okay. You
now
don't
you're
need to
there.
see my face.
Yeah, the balance is, yeah,
Yeah, balance is hard. And I was saying like, with the balance, it's like
it's okay. Can you
people
hear me?
people always
No,
I
I
hear
see
you.
you. Now,
Do you see me?
okay. Yeah, I think there might be a delay is all.
Is there a delay? Okay. Do you hear my voice though?
Yes,
Do you
and
hear
now
me,
it matches
Margie?
your teeth. Good. Perfect.
Okay, okay, good. Yeah, I was saying, like with business, there's no real balance. I mean, you try to balance your life as much as you can, but there's always things that are
Yes.
gonna be sacrificed for that. Yeah. Is my face not matching my mouth? My what I'm saying? You hear me, Margie?
Yeah, you don't go home. It's cutting in and out.
Okay.
But I heard what you said. Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me, but
I could hear
the
you.
thing about yeah, can you hear me?
I hear you now. Technology.
I wonder if I go
Do you hear me?
maybe if I go inside. I'll try to go inside, closer to where my internet is.